C8 scans was. You can go into a corner and it's got like a.
Exactly.
Sir?
Coefficient. So it just goes around.
Okay, I got 7 o'clock. Go ahead and call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Go to the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Support. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
So we'll move into call the public, and just so everyone's aware, there were a few commission members that weren't able to attend, some obligations long known and some last minute. So we do have just the 3 of us. We'll go through the same items we were planning to previously, so that way the public's aware of the results, and then we can review it as a commission with Zach. So next item is call to the public. If there's anyone at this time, please come to the podium and state your name.
Scott Dietrich, White Lake Road. Are we going to be discussing the survey?
The results.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What, are you going to be explaining what your terms, what they mean?
I will do my best.
Okay. I'm not going to beat you up, but I mean, there's just so many conflicting questions out there, to me. I mean, that's why we could have helped to narrow it down a little bit. Like, do you want to park? Are you willing to pay for it? Blah, blah, blah. You know, we should have specified a little more like that. And I don't know if we got time, but if we can determine, if we got the results of the survey, and we know if there's a direction for parks and other things like that, can we have something on the ballot that maybe would be more directive when it comes to election time? Maybe we can't get it on the ballot, and we might be able to get it on a separate piece of paper, people to check off while they're here. That's it. So we're not going to really get a definite answer on what people want.
I can address that when we.
I hope so, because it just, I mean, I just think we didn't narrow it down enough. I'm very confused.
Hey Ross, I was trying to pull, you mentioned electronic, this will be available electronically.
Yeah,
Where is it?
the survey?
Yeah.
It's,
No, the meeting, it's not in my email.
The what?
You said you were gonna send it, is it in the email that you sent out?
The survey results?
The whole, well, okay,
That's one of 3. That was the first email of 3 emails.
okay.
That's the meeting packet. That had the agenda, the visioning session outline, and the survey results.
Anybody else for public comment? Go ahead.
Jeanette Ropetta, 9437 Fuller Drive. Is this supposed to be just what's the public comment on what's on the agenda right now? Okay. So 3 weeks ago, I emailed the Planning Commission and the Planning and Zoning a list of suggestions that would help increase public awareness about the upcoming visioning sessions. Did you guys all get that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just for the record, I did not hear back from anybody. I thought I had some good ideas in there that would be helpful. I guess that's really all I want to say. I do have one more question. I don't know if you can answer it, but I did talk about signage, and we know that signage works. And one of my suggestions was to have a sign in the parking lot for the visioning sessions that says, you know, tonight, visionings, or this afternoon, or whenever it is, visioning session. I didn't get an answer on any of those. So if I make up my own sign, will I be allowed to put it on if I collect money to get that sign made?
I can't speak that on Ross. If
Planning
we've ever
Commission
had
can-
that.
that answer.
We can't give you that at the planning commission.
If you want to send me an email, reach out. I'll make sure it gets to the appropriate channels.
And would you, I know I've asked you before if you go for that for us, but you said no. But on this particular, if you guys approve what the sign says, would you possibly say, yeah, you know, we'd like the sign also? Like go to bat for us, wanting a sign up that says the visioning sessions are happening.
We can inquire.
I don't see a problem with that.
No, I think the cost and whatever else.
If you put a sign up, why wouldn't we not want more people to be here? That's fine.
Yeah, I don't see any issue, but it's just, the planning commission doesn't make that
Okay,
call.
and do we have budget for advertising in this, in?
I saw it in the tri-county.
Yeah,
Yes, I did see that.
press releases, yeah, but they actually publish that without charging us.
Yeah, they usually do press releases without charge, was a great thing. And that was a good article, but signage, like I said in my email, we have contacts, a lot of residents do, we get really great prices, we wouldn't put up anything without you guys approving it, and it would just really be information. So I would really appreciate an answer on that from somebody.
You can
Shoot me
certainly
an
put
email
on,
tonight, tomorrow morning, and I'll run it by the officers and see what we can make
Okay.
happen.
Okay, great.
you can certainly put on your website, the visiting session, whatever.
Absolutely.
Whatever you want. We
Yeah.
can't control that, so I would put that up there.
Yeah, we do have it, I am mentioning it. I guess what I'm asking is if there's a budget for advertising, if we really want people to show up, then maybe it would be great if that was just one of my ideas in the email, which again, I didn't hear back. So, thank you.
Anyone else with public comment at this time? All right, we'll go into old business, item number 1, master plan, and there's a lot of information, Zach, and I think maybe this is the right appropriate document to start with.
Hey Zach, I got a question for you, and I apologize because I just didn't kind of get a chance to take a look at this, but what was the respondents' percentage of the potential population?
I can work on that. I did it at some time, but my brain is goo. I did it for another community recently, so it's in the range that we would expect. for a
13,
community.
15?
The 8 to 10.
Oh, it's that low? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And like I said, 5 to 10 you're happy with. That's what the typical rate is. I think it may be down a bit lower because there was another pretty big survey and people can get surveyed out for the townhouse. But it's within what we would typically expect.
Thank you.
All right, so yes, there is a lot in here. Remember, the community survey is one of the tools. It's not the only tool. It's part of the background information that you gather, part of the visioning sessions, and part of the questions is to help provide guidance for what we ask at the visioning session. So if there was absolutely no interest in parks, then we're probably not going to bring that up, or it's at the very bottom of the list. If there's a lot of interest in parks, then that's something we delve more to the community visioning session. So I'm not sure if there's any particular way I can kind of go through it and see things that popped out to me. I'm also interested to hear what you guys were like, oh, that was different, or we want to learn more about this.
So the only question I had, Zach, is from your standpoint, prior to our visioning sessions, do you have anything that you need direction on from the planning commission? Based on these results, right? Some of them are self-explanatory, and hey, what are you going to do with them? But as we go through it, we'll develop that. But I just want to see from your point of view as we go into prepare for them.
I'll kind of pop those up as we get into
As we go
different
through, okay,
sections.
perfect.
Yep.
So then we're good, yeah.
So one thing that I haven't done yet, but is possible if folks are really interested, is we can sort and filter this data. So, for example, we could see, do people who've lived here less than 5 years answer things differently than folks who've lived here more than 25 years? So if there's any way you want to slice and dice this, let us know. We can do that. An odd thing that I found in communities where they do look at that granular level is typically the people who've lived there for 5 years or less are the ones that say there's too much development and they just move into the new subdivision. But we haven't gone there. So,
Is there anything that was a surprise to you in the survey?
yes, I have a couple of stars in here, and I'll bring them up when we get to them. Let's see. So it is an interesting, actually one of the interesting things that pops for me on page 1 is the distribution, that there were a lot of folks who've lived here for kind of the short 5 to 10, or 0 to 10 years. and lots of folks who've lived here for a long time. And that's an interesting distribution. It's a little bit more average, but it kind of makes sense. The folks who've lived here for a long time have a lot of interest because they've got roots. The folks who just moved here are interested too because they made the very conscious decision to move here. So it kind of makes sense, but it's a little peculiar. On page 2, you note that the respondents do tend to be towards the higher end. Most folks were employed or retired. There's a lot of retired folks who answered this. I'm curious what you guys' responses to question 8 of what community folks are employed in. I was expecting more from communities that didn't show up as much. Like Brighton was really low. Fenton was kind of high, which you'd expect, but Flint is also pretty low. Any thoughts on
I
that?
don't see Brighton on here.
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah.
It's the second up on the
Second
top.
one down. In our
Page 3.
Yeah, I would say there's a large,
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the.
Well, those might be retirees.
yeah, retirees, or if anybody's employed with
Uh-huh.
one of the automotive companies, they likely.
I think the award for the longest community transfer is the fellow who works in Tel Aviv. I hope that's remotely. But so one of the things, it's hard to quantify, but I hope you guys, as we go through this process, every now and then just kind of read through the text answers. It's really informative, just to get a sense of what's in the air and what folks are concerned about. Question 9. That's a pretty high percentage of folks who work at home. So that's pretty neat to see here. And there aren't a whole lot of people who do really long commutes. So that's pretty nice too.
Is that such a high number because of COVID?
There's likely a couple of reasons. COVID kind of pushed it. And I suspect a lot of the folks in Tyrone Township work in positions where they're able to work remotely, so they're not working the cash register at Kroger. They're kind of high up in management. Based on the demographic, the ages, they're able to do that more.
Do you assume that did not answer are people that are not working?
Yep.
Okay.
Let's see, on to page 5. The household size, that kind of makes sense. We know from the survey in the Decennial survey and the American Community Survey that you're right in the 2.7 range for household size, so that's pretty representative. The folks who responded, there were a lot of them without kids, and that makes sense because there were a lot of retired folks who did. They usually don't have kids there. A little surprising for me is the number of folks who didn't have anyone age 65 or older. Again, because of retirees, so the folks in Tyrone Township are doing good. They're able to retire early. So whatever you guys have in the water, keep it. It's working out nicely.
Zach, so you're talking question 12, saying that people that are younger than the age that have people that are older than that who are living with them.
Well, so or if you're over 65, and you live in the household, that's a 1.
Okay, thank you.
Question 13, the folks who responded to the survey are doing pretty well financially. And it makes sense, especially if they've moved in the past 10 years. We got the prices for your housing. They got to be doing pretty good to move in, so that's kind of representative of the newer moving in. For the description of where you live, I think that's pretty consistent with what I would have expected based on your housing stock. One thing to note is there were 0 folks from the mobile homes. I don't know, that was hotly debated. They didn't, my understanding is, didn't get the cards because they don't own property, they don't pay property taxes. When you look at that is a sizable chunk of the community that didn't participate. and actually you guys have a much higher percentage of mobile home units than all of your surrounding neighbors. We got it in here. So that's an underrepresented group as far as the responses. I'm curious what folks have to say about question 15. Why were you attracted to Tyrone Township? Most popular was the natural areas, second lakes or rivers, taxes, and proximity to employment. Is that kind of consistent with what you were expecting, or any surprises in there?
I like taxes, schools, good schools, taxes, rural, you know?
So this is kind of it seems like a very simple question, but this kind of helps feed, these are the important things to folks.
I think people like the country atmosphere maybe, and the good schools and
The lakes.
the lakes and the, yeah.
I think in my experience, I've heard every single one of them with the exception of working farmland.
They all like working from there.
Nobody's ever specifically said that is what attracted them to the area.
It's not that-
Everything else I've heard at least once.
Yeah, when I drive across Center Road when neighbors are spreading their remnants out, pretty smart.
Hey, go over to my mom and dad's house, it's right next to it.
You lose
Where your
those, you
food
get a
comes
lot of
from.
houses.
Oof. Oh, they spread it through the air. It's terrible.
That's not to say that I've had many people saying that they frown upon farming or agriculture, just I've never heard anyone say that is one of their primary reasons for moving to the area.
That's kind of weird, it's really high.
Do we even have many actually, other than, I mean, I don't, like, Giggler's farm here, and other people do, but do we have actually many working farms in the township where other farmers don't come here to
Well,
do
there-
their?
there's,
Yes.
there's some.
Yeah.
Flowers and soybean everywhere.
Well, yeah, but who's
Crops,
farming?
and most of them are done through farm leases,
Yeah.
which there's a number of farmers in the area that will lease the farmland
That's right,
from
yeah.
other
I
farmers.
live by.
But it's like layers, at least the property.
Yep, layers to
Players, Gigglers.
Yep.
Yeah, I live by farmers who are lived there forever.
Yep.
So generation, and they have a farm next to my house.
You just
Which-
does some stuff.
You just
That's
doesn't.
wonderful.
Yep, it's great for preserving, that's the rural character.
Exactly.
But you also need to be willing to put up with, you know, some of
I
the
don't
nuisance
mind.
factors.
Yeah, come on in once in a while.
And that's
I don't
great.
mind it.
I'm not going to touch on the tech stuff, but again, read through it. They're treasure troves. It's really fun to hear what people put down. Any other thoughts on that before we jump into housing? All right. One thing that jumped out to me is the fact that 61% thought that the amount of residential development was about right. That's pretty good. That's pretty darn good. As I said, usually we expect too much tends to be higher than too little, just because folks don't like change, and if a house pops up in an old soybean field, that's something very visible, and you've lost the soybean. So the fact that you got 61% there is pretty good.
I can add my 2 cents to that. I think one of the reasons is we haven't had a large number of major developments as far as subdivisions with 50-plus lots or site condos or anything. Most of them that we've had in the last 10 years have been small, more like 10 or so units on larger lots, as opposed to the higher density development, which already existed. It was done prior to 10 years ago.
So it sounds like we're doing it kind of like the way the community wants us to.
As of the last 10 years, that's been the pattern, yes.
Okay.
Low density, primarily just land divisions, some site condos, but they tend to be,
Bigger lots.
yeah, larger lots, fewer units.
Thank you.
All right. You see there the distribution of how long they've owned, that's consistent with how long they've lived in the community. There are a lot of folks who've had their houses for very long times. And pray for the folks who buy those looking at old taxes, because they're gonna pop really high when they come uncapped. The next couple, the variety of housing options and variety of price ranges. So from the census data, with the number of units, I have it somewhere here, but almost all of your housing stock is single-family houses. One lot, one house, with another big chunk of mobile homes, and I think something like 50 multifamily, so duplexes or apartments. So in this case, the perception of what folks are looking at is slightly different than the types of housing. And what I read is the folks who've answered this were looking at big lots and small lots and farm lots and lake lots. So they look at it a little bit differently, and in their eyes, the number of families that can be in a place is a different metric than what does it look like on the outside. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Most folks thought there was a good variety of housing price range. We actually got from the assessor the arm's length sales, and that's some really interesting stuff. It's going up. It's been going up quite a bit. Now, some of the really interesting stuff is what level of support do you have for the different types. The highest one, which we all expected, I think, before, is the large lot, the 3 acres or bigger. Next was the next smallest, the 1.5 or 1 3/4 to 3 acres. Then single family on smaller lots.
That's one of those questions that confuse me. I'm sorry for interrupting. But people, how do you determine who wants 3 acres? I mean, because that's a high number on the 1.75 to 3 acres too. You either gotta have one or the other. There's no question there. Do you want, which one do they like more? Can you?
Yep, and that's the thing where when we get to the visioning session, we can say,
Okay.
here's 100 acres. It can be developed with 3 acres and this many houses, or this. So we can kind of get in the fine grain. So this is kind of,
It just kind of threw me because, you know.
yeah, this is kind of laying the groundwork.
All right.
And another way that could have been asked is which one would you want?
Which
You
one
only
would you
get to pick
prefer?
one.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Folks do not like subdivisions. Only 43% strongly support or support. And I think that's going to be a challenge because most future development is probably going to be subdivision style. Just economically, you can't do regular divisions and make it pencil out. So I think that's going to be really important to shape subdivisions so that they're consistent with the character. So that kind of is a trigger if we have to pay attention to this. Not a lot of support for duplex or two-family. They can be difficult to do in rural communities, especially without sewer service. One other thing that really popped out to me is the 20F, the accessory dwellings. That is really high. That is, I have not seen it that high in any other community I've looked at. Well, maybe Dexter, but we're a city. And I'm not sure why. That'd be something great to ask at the survey. I'm not sure if folks are thinking about having their adult parents living with them or their young adult children living with them.
I think for more people,
It's
it's
been
their
both.
adult parents. And, you know, the baby boomers have already reached the age where their parents are pretty much gone. But now the baby boomers may be the ones moving in with their kids.
There's a lot of kids moving back with their parents too.
I've seen it both ways.
Yeah.
But since, I mean, over the past few years, I've had more than I can count as far as inquiries on this type of situation. Whether it be attached, detached, just some
Housing's too
means of
expensive.
caring for relatives.
It's just so expensive, they
You
can't.
got plenty of space, it makes sense if you do it.
But you're looking at $5,000 a month minimum for any type of assisted living facility.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or if you're getting
Yep.
nursing services tossed in with it.
What kind of care are you even gonna get for $5,000 nowadays? Like, minimum, if that.
It doesn't pay to get old, and it doesn't pay not to get old, so you're stuck.
And my observations are that at the national level, there's going to be a lot more multi-generational families in the U.S. just because there are pressures on the rising costs that we're going to see it more commonly. So maybe you guys are on the cutting edge here too. As one would suspect, not a lot of support for apartments and condos. It's tough to find places to make them work in a community without water, sewer. And you do have water, sewer, but not everywhere. Very little support for mobile homes, which makes sense. You guys, again, have two really big ones. Parks. Senior housing, that was a little surprising for me that it was that high, but when you look at the demographics of who was responding, maybe the folks are starting to think, I don't want to take care of 3 acres, but I don't want to move into the city.
Yeah.
So, again, this is kind of me thinking ahead. So one of the things when it gets time to translate this into zoning code is one of the recognizable and substantial benefits you could put in for planning and development is if you include senior housing somewhere in there. You know, like 10 units or something, that's one of the things you have to do, or one of the things that you could do. I was also happily surprised at the relatively high support for the affordable housing. Now, this definition, for those of you who don't remember, is based on kind of the standard metric of the median household should spend no more than 1/3 of their income on housing, and this is what it penciled in for the township here. So that's higher than what most communities would do, and I think the way that you guys phrased it here was helpful for that. A lot of times people perceive it as Section 8 housing or the giant government house rises, which aren't a good fit here. So it's a challenge to do, but
Isn't that what those manufactured communities are supposed to be?
supposed to.
That's how they're selling them nowadays.
Yep. Under games.
Let's see. On page 14, at the top there, the residential developments with smaller lots than otherwise allowed required preserve open space, natural features, or working farmland. So there was kind of a lot packed into that little question, and it was pretty evenly split. I think, though, if it's explored at the visioning sessions, where it can be a way of, hey, you can get the density of 3-acre lots, but you can still keep the forest around it so you can drive by the road and never know there are houses back there. That would be an interesting question to ask. So see, what is it that kind of makes folks not support that, but they support the open space and the preservation thing. I suspect part of it is, if you read through the responses, there were a lot of folks who moved here purposely to not have neighbors. I don't want to call it, I don't want to call it the hermit thing, and so there's a sense of, these are different from what I moved here, and I kind of don't want to see them even if I don't live there. And there's also the entanglement with a site condominium where you have to have a homeowners association by state law, and that entanglement isn't pleasant always. It's one of the reasons why I bought an old plat personally. So that there's a lot of potential to ask various questions on there. Let's see. So before we move to non-residential, are there, aside from the things that I raised, are there things that pop to your guys' mind that you're like, we'd like to explore this in the visioning session?
Well, I think the one that I saw there was the interest in developing some ordinance that will go a long way to the addition of a mother-in-law apartment or whatever on your home without causing too much grief in regards to regulation. We knew that was an issue, but it's interesting to see how much of an issue it is.
My comment is, looks like key 21 was the open space thing, which we've already kind of talked about, but if that's something where we can preserve more open space and allow, let's say, the density on the parcel, but like you said, so you drive by and you don't even see it. I like that. I think that's what people kind of want. They don't, that's at least from what I've gathered from this.
You have big lots, so you don't need the open spaces, do you?
Well,
But all you do is have just big yards and lots of mowing and all that stuff, and if you have them kind of clustered, I kind of like that personally. I mean,
is the question, is that above and beyond what we already have in the ordinance as far as what's mandated, like OSP, or does it tie into that?
It's kind of similar in what it's, so there are two kind of cluster options right now.
We
So
have
the
CDO and OSP in the ordinance.
Yeah, so state of Michigan says you need to do open space preservation, which is you show how you can develop the lot using the base zoning, and then if you preserve half of the lot for farmland or in a natural state, you can put the same number of houses on the other half. State of Michigan says you gotta do that. You have to allow them that option. The other option that the state allows, doesn't require but allows, which you guys do have, is the plan unit development, where you can, if there's a recognizable and substantial benefit, which you can define or leave as vague as you want, although it's probably best if it's very specific with maybe a little potpourri option at the end, that you can allow them to do something similar. You can require them to preserve more space or less space, or give them bonuses for doing certain things. If they put in a pathway along the road, you can give bonuses, additional lots, or preserving thicker trees along the edge. So one of the best tools to kind of sort out this question is having slides. So there are a lot of good examples where you can show this is what 100 houses on 100 acres look like in a traditional subdivision, and this is what 100 houses look like on 100 acres clustered. And that's something that's hard to do on a survey like this, but you can show the picture and people can kind of see the differences. One of the other things I've found is the rural character is different from everybody. For me, rural character was we had little corn chips flying from the sky when the farmers were bringing in their field trailers, and dirt roads and propane pigs and no cable. And if it was a paved road and the guy was turning left to his driveway, he would pull over so you could shoot past him in the driving lane. For other folks, it's a different thing. I know when I was in Dexter Township, the main thing for them was they did not want to see houses from the road. They didn't care if there were 100 houses back there, just as long as they didn't see them. And so that's what we'll be able to do with pictures of specific, like yes or no. Is this rural or not? All right, are we ready for non-residential? So again, the fact that most folks put you in the about right means you're doing pretty good. The joke in planning is if people are equally upset with both directions, then you've hit that sweet spot, and the fact that the sweet spot is pretty good.
Wouldn't that be the open space one? Where it's like 50-50, agree and disagree?
Yep, yes, yep. There are lots of ways to hit the median.
Yeah.
So some of these questions, it was tricky to ask about the variety of commercial activities because there aren't a lot in here, and so it was written, the folks I tested with and asked about it, they kind of viewed it as the area. So like here in Fenton and Heartland is kind of what they considered for this. And that's how I view this, because there's not a lot of variety of commercial activities here, but it's within your trade area, within your community area. The specific ones, the question 25, we see there is a lot of support relatively for the office, the low impact commercial. For the smaller retail, not a lot of support for the big fellas. And that's actually kind of a good thing. When you go down to M59, there are a lot of development pads that are still vacant. And it makes a lot more sense for it to go there where there's traffic. Because you guys have really weird intersections from the expressway here. I don't know what they're thinking, but small restaurants, popular. Large chains, not quite as much. There's scattering around for that. Drive-through restaurants, not as popular. One thing that I was surprised at the light industrial, that the level of support was so high for that. I was not, surprised about the heavy industrial, and that's, if you guys follow this, it would be a major change from your current future land use plan that has basically an entire section devoted to heavier industrial uses. So it would be taking a square mile. And don't need to discuss it now, but just kind of the balancing that goes on with that is generally most industrial uses provide more in revenues to government than it takes in services, because there are no kids going there. The water use, they're generally taken care of on their own. And so a lot of communities look to it as a way to provide services without increasing taxes on the residential. The policy decision that you will draft and the township board will ultimately decide is, are we okay foregoing industrial because we don't want that and the impacts if that means we have to pay a bit more for services. So again, not to discuss now, but just kind of discuss the balancing that happens with those discussions.
Well, there's a trade-off for anything, people need to understand that.
Nothing in nature is free.
Yeah.
Except for college.
Let's see.
I find it interesting, what was the, way up top here, this here, real estate insurance doctors, this support. This support almost exactly matches the senior living homes and then the granny suites. It's almost exact, I think one digit off. But,
You don't want to drive very far from it.
yeah.
What number?
Still, we
Sorry,
don't know if
it's-
everybody answered that, so your
25.
percentages could be based on very few answers, correct?
No, but it's,
25A.
it matches actual respondents.
Okay.
In-law suites.
Oh, I see, gotcha,
And, senior living,
sorry.
208 and 30s. That's just interesting.
They want their doctors close.
And one thing I do want to say is you guys were working on this draft. I think the fact that you were able to include the examples of things really helped folks. There were a lot fewer questions about what does this mean, what does that mean, and a lot of others that just say it's small office or whatever. So the fact that you were able to peg that with some general examples and local examples, I think was really helpful. Where did we leave off? Relatively high support for high-tech industrial. Those tend to be high value for property tax generation, but much smaller impact than the others, and easier to service from the infrastructure side point too. So that may be a potential thing to focus on.
So just something to add to that, that's one of the main categories in our PIRO area, which is the Planned Industrial Research Office. I think it's PIRO A or PIRO.
It's one of the pyros.
It's either PIRO A or PIRO C, that's the office one. See, I don't know because I never get any inquiries on it. People want to see the office, but in the last 6
How
years.
many
nobody's
inquiries
heard
have you gotten in the last
about putting in offices?
5-10 years?
I haven't gotten one.
I think office is really a dead category.
We did plan for it, and we have huge areas, most of which is for sale, that is designated for that type of use, and nobody's interested.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, because it could be a low impact, higher revenue source, but
We had some land down between Milford Road and Wixon Road that was office research. I mean, and that's a hot corridor on Grand River. It sat for 12 years. It was finally bought by Exotic Automation, and they put up a 160,000 square foot manufacturing facility.
Yep, which is not pharmaceutical
And that's all that's
research.
going in down there. Huge, big warehouses and manufacturing. Almost no office.
I feel like that would have happened to our PIRO designated area, but we don't have the infrastructure to support that. We don't have the infrastructure.
One type of non-residential development is the warehousing. You guys are on a corridor that connects to a lot of important things. There was moderate support for the smaller warehousing and strong opposition to the larger distribution center. And Amazon type facility, a large warehouse facility, would have much greater truck traffic. That kind of makes sense.
That last one, you said there was more against it, turn it down. There was more against it than was supporting that warehousing.
Yeah, that was middling support. It was.
That's why I said it wasn't very support. I mean, we got, how many storage units do we need down on 23? We got another one going in there now.
It's amazing how many people inquire about those
I know,
types
but
of
this-
things. I know. I
We
mean,
got all enough storage down on 23? I'm not against them, but we just got enough.
it's about demand. Most
I know.
people that call in looking to do a storage facility are looking more towards the outdoor storage specific to
Yeah.
boats and RVs, because that's what people have around here. You know, they're on lakes or they're near lakes and they have RVs.
Slightly more support for that outdoor storage,
Yeah,
probably because folks have their RVs in their.
I want to say that's at least 75% of the inquiries that I've received is outdoor
Once again, that
versus
big,
indoor.
way back where nobody can see it, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of made sense. I was a little surprised at the level of support for solar farm. They can be kind of polarizing. There are very rural communities that will burn the place down before they'll even consider it. There are others that will embrace it because they'd rather have solar panels than 100 acres of houses, or 200, 300 acres of houses.
Do you get any, does the township get any benefit from that by subsidies and that?
It's an industrial thing that you get a tax.
I don't like it.
But you don't get credits, or we don't get additional benefit to the community.
No, I think it's still taxed as farmland, isn't it?
The farmland is still taxed as farmland, and you can still qualify for your farmland tax credit through the
Even though
state.
you got a solar farm.
But now you have $10 million worth of industrial equipment sitting on top of it that can get taxed. So that was the thing in central Michigan where I grew up, is every single one of those blinking windmills, that's $1.5 million of industrial equipment.
It goes bad at some point.
So it's the
Has to
person
be
that
replaced.
It's yeah.
Yeah.
So again, that was a bit shocking for me for the solar farm, but it's a way to stop other development until we get cold fusion sorted out.
Just for background on that, we did revise our solar farm standards as a special land use a few years back, primarily to consider it in farming areas, in the farming residential district on larger parcels where farmers would like to lease out some of their land for solar farms. So far, it hasn't happened, but we did visit that a few years back.
And it is coming. Maybe 3 months ago, 4 months ago, was in a meeting. There's another group I'm at with the Consumers Energy, renewable energy person for the state. And in addition to giving us an idea of what they're doing at the end, they gave us if you know anyone who has 300 to 600 acres, tell us. Please tell us. So that's kind of the scope of what they're looking at.
Because they're mandated.
Well, I think one of the issues with properties in our township, actually, I know one of the issues is we don't have a lot of the large tracts where it's going to be profitable to the utility companies. So a lot of them, they may be interested, the landowners may, but the utility companies aren't.
It's a lot harder to assemble when there are multiple different properties, so that's why they're going like Cohocton, where there are large chunks still.
I don't understand why they just don't put them on people's houses. I mean, how many,
Well, individual homeowners do that. That's one thing that we see a ton of, but
Well, I'm
that's
saying, they
private.
want to put a big area of solar panels in. I'd rather see them on people's houses than taking up a field.
One of the questions I asked the lady is, how soon are we going to start seeing solar farms on the top of malls and Best Buy and Meijer and Sam's Clubs? And they said it's basically an economy of scale. If they can put solar panels on 600 acres with just drilling helical screws, that's the low fruit. They're trying to get as much of the low fruit as they can. It'll probably be a while before it starts going on top of buildings.
Hopefully China can keep making those panels for us.
Yeah, someone should have thought how we were gonna recycle that when we started building them, but,
Right?
That is a big problem.
Lot of
there
work.
was a lot of support, for public recreation and private recreation, more for public. So kind of getting my hat thought on is, finding ways in the master plan to incorporate that and support that.
Yeah, but do they want to pay for it? That's what we.
Well, there's a fabulous quote in here, is to preserving land, where so I want to preserve the land, but I don't want to pay for it, gotta figure something else.
Okay, but there are grant.
We got grants, yeah.
Yep.
I already talked to Monty the other day.
Yep.
I'm looking at stuff, see information on the first.
And so this can actually be used, so in order to qualify for grants, you need to have a recreation plan that has very specific stuff you have to put in it. But this can be background that feeds that, and also if a grant is applied for to put in a pickleball court wherever, the township can point and say, hey, the community says we want this, and it'll help feed that. Was there anything peculiar that stood out from folks from that batch of non-residential?
Did you mention anything about senior developments?
Senior-
I remember you brought it up, I didn't see it up there, maybe I.
It was back in the residential.
Okay, all right.
There was pretty high support, which
Yeah,
was
it's pretty big thing. Harvest got a couple, it was like, I don't know.
all right. Then on to the character. And this is again something that it's better to ask with pictures. So the typical suburban green field, you got something that was a field or a forest and you drop stuff on. It's kind of not as much support for that. Obviously, you hate to see your natural resources turned over. A lot of support for the infill. So try to get in those nooks and crannies where there might already be uses where you can fit it in. The scattered development, that was kind of interesting that the general support was so high, but it can make sense that you don't want it boom all in one spot. You kind of want a store here and a little convenience store there, something like that. And then, as you would suspect, there was a lot of support for having it along 23 and near the ramps. Near City of Fenton, and that's something that, again, it would be best to suss out as part of the community visioning session. Is it's very common if you're adjacent to an urban area to have it touch there, because you don't want people driving through fields and roads to get stuff. You want them to stay there. Like Owen Road, you wouldn't want to extend that down a couple of miles. But there are, most of the areas right next to the city now are residential. So it wouldn't be knocking them down and putting in a Sam's Club. It'd be different than that. Not a lot of support for mixed use. Again, makes sense for a rural area. You kind of want to keep them more separated. It's why you've moved here. And that is a big takeaway. There were a lot of comments in here too, and again, read it, set it down, come back and read it. It's kind of neat to see. I do want to say, I think a couple of folks have reached out and said, oh my gosh, there's some really mean comments in there, but it actually isn't. There are a lot more mean ones that have been, so folks were pretty good about being productive and getting stuff in there. All right. Any other thoughts or questions on non-residential or things that additional things you'd like to pull out for the visioning sessions?
My only question is, reading these comments, it seems like the real strong comments are like, keep Tyrone rural, keep it country. Do we run into conflicts with zoning and people's rights to use their properties they want?
Potentially,
As we go
yes.
How our
forward?
zoning ordinance is written, yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, how do we balance that?
So, for most uses, there's an exception for marijuana in the state of Michigan, but the Zoning Enabling Act says you shall not prohibit a use for which there's a demonstrated need in the community that can't be met in surrounding communities. So that's for example, why trailer parks, mobile home communities are able to go in and force their way. If there's no mobile homes and they can say there's not enough affordable housing, they go in and they get it to happen. I'm trying to think of another example. Back in the day, my grandma lived in Melvindale. Melvindale City Council wanted to ban gas stations. I don't know why, some of them probably had an anger issue with one of the stuff, but there's a need for gas stations in the world, at least today. You can't ban gas stations. Now, where it starts to get interesting is, I'm going to pick on a community that has really bad soils. You can say, we don't want a trailer park here because we've got no infrastructure to support that density, or we don't have a road structure that can support those trips. But you have to document the why. Or if you're not by a highway, if there's a need for a large industrial plant, then you have a better backstop to say, no. We got nowhere for the trucks to go. There's a low bridge, how are you going to get it here?
Okay, so what I'm going though is like, for example, we got this Pyro district. Why don't we just take that off the map completely and turn that like into something like residential? Could we do that? Because if people, when I'm reading, there's no demand for that. People don't want it. Why can't we use this master planning section to try to get rid of stuff that there's no demand for anyways?
Yeah.
And put things in that the residents want without infringing on the property owners. I don't want to, I don't want to
develop, they just.
I don't want to take away someone's right to make money on their property. But if nothing's happened in 10 or 15 years, then let's kind of swing back around to where people want it to be. I mean, that's just my thought.
For background, we have not had a single property rezoned to a Pyro district since that's been established.
And Pyro was established at the last master plan?
That's when it was created, and then they amended the ordinance to incorporate it. It was discussed during the previous 2012 master
And
plan.
you haven't had one inquiry?
Well,
Except for the
The asphalt.
The asphalt.
plant.
that was the one which would have been suited further in the Pyro area, but they applied for a rezoning under M2, I believe, which,
Could we,
because M2 and M1 still exist in our ordinance, but we also have the Pyro that would allow for a variety of other uses.
we've got our M1 covered, our M2 covered. Because
We
of-
don't have any
That in
M2.
concrete,
That's M1.
is it?
That's M1, the auto parts, TRW, Kelsey Hayes, ZF, that's,
And we have to have some M2?
I mean, I believe we have to have something in our zoning ordinance for heavy industrial.
You've got one.
What is
Do you
that?
have to though?
Well, we have to,
What is
allow
that?
for it.
You said we do have that?
we have M1 and M2 districts in the ordinance. Currently on our zoning map, we only have M1, no M2.
We have to have it.
Something to think about for sure.
I'm just thinking that, I'm reading these comments and, I just don't see.
You want to try to match as closely what's possible, but also, so part of the questions will be the balancing of if we can get a high-tech assembly with the printing stuff.
Well, you're also trying to figure out what is going to be needed 10 years from now.
Yeah,
We got another
And
census.
looking 10 years back, we had no idea what was going to go on. We assumed that little malls were going to be the big thing, and
We assumed a huge demand for office space,
Yeah.
and then we have COVID. and all
Office
that.
space malls, no, that's dead. Go down
Yeah.
to Latson and Grand River and see all the vacant space down there, it's a mess.
So if somebody's got a crystal ball that will tell them that kind of stuff, I want to talk to them because I got some funds I want.
So- the kind of the shorter version would be you ought to plan for some of it, but not a lot of it especially if there's not demand and there's not interest.
Going back to the M2, do so we don't have any M2, I thought Clinton Concrete was an M2.
I can double check that, I'm pretty sure it's all on one.
Because if it is, can we just say that's our M2 and we're done? like our two trailer parks, which are actually, like you said, are quite large, we can say we're done with that.
Yep, and that's actually documented in the housing article. It says, we got these 2 parks, and then housing type, it compares you to all the other communities, and you got a big chunk, they've got a little chunk. So for industrial, there's all sorts of ways you can toss it up. You can have heavy, you can have light, you can have high tech, you can have, slice it however you want. With the master plan, again, it's looking the 10 to 25 years in advance, partly so you can plan infrastructure and folks can get some idea of what they're going to be moving next to. For the zoning ordinance, it's, you don't want to create legal non-conforming uses.
No two, all in one.
Okay.
So like the plant over there, you wouldn't want to write changes to your zoning ordinance that causes them to not be able to exist.
But I would think that we would have to be careful about areas that are zoned a particular way, and if we put in the master plan, we don't want that zoning for any place like that. What's the recourse for the guy that owns that property? You know, well, wait a minute, I bought it, and you told me M2 was what it was, and now you want to take that away.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want that to happen.
Yeah, so the short answer is the zoning is the actual regulatory document. So the master plan can say we want to have a public park across the way there at the intersection where the factory is now. But the zoning still says it's manufacturing. So they still get to build and pull permits and site plans based on that. Where it starts to get tougher for a property owner is if it's going to be a 30, 50-year investment. Because the township has kind of put the flag in that says we don't want this thing here long term. There are protections afforded for legal nonconformity, so if the zoning is changed, they get to continue to do that, but they can't expand and they often can't rebuild. And it gets a lot more challenging to move around.
So you got to pray for a tornado to come through.
Before you go any further, can I ask a question on the infrastructure for the residential and non-residential? I don't think we asked the people if they were willing to expand the sewers. Because we had a problem with the sewers last time, getting funding and stuff, we're still paying it off. And I, for one, don't want to see it. And they're dumping stuff in the rivers up north anyway. We're shipping the sewer treatment plants and they're always pumping in the river. So where are we going with this?
So as far as the sewer infrastructure goes, that's actually, we share the sewer system with Heartland Township, and it's managed through the Livingston County Drain Commissioner's Office. Livingston County Drain Commissioner's Office comes up with a master plan regarding sewer infrastructure, and it's up to us being part of the interjurisdictional agreement with Heartland Township to kind of add our feedback into
That's
it.
what I'm saying. What if we don't want any more expansion? What's there is there. We don't want to go off into these swampy areas and this and that, because it was a mess. What we've got so far has been a mess.
Yeah, there were some significant issues with the initial system when it went through, and I don't think anyone would deny that.
I mean, we can ask, I don't know.
As
if we
far
can
as
ask the people.
potential expansion, just using logic, it's likely that at some point Lake Shannon will need to go to the sewer per the state.
Yeah.
I mean,
But no, I mean, future developments, if the people, because like, we say we got property down the road, guy wants to develop it. If he can't get perks.
you're saying if someone wanted to rezone so they can develop
If
more
we
highly
develop
dense, if they
piece of
bring in
property
the
down the
sewer.
road, okay, say we got a parcel they can develop. Do we want the hassle, say, listen, no, you can do the larger lots, but you gotta have drain fields. The community doesn't want to expand any more sewage. You know what I'm saying? We don't want that headache. What's there is there. And if you got large enough parcel, you can put drain field, we don't want to deal with it no more. I mean, we're still paying for the last one. Sorry, we are.
Yeah, so infrastructure, especially sewer, is the biggest driver for residential development. If you've got sewer capacity, things can happen. If you don't, it really throttles it back. So part of the examination with the housing, the size, and one of the exercises we're going to do is, if we had to put housing, where would you put it? You know, we would have a little map put in, see where that goes. One of the things in the examination of this is kind of an infrastructure plan of where do we see more housing and and one of the things is you can outline, this is the sewer area, future sewer area. And that's only that's the only place we're gonna put it. And if you wanna do these developments, that's where it goes. And you try to tie it to areas where there's paved roads and capacity and those types of things. One of the tools that I've seen some communities do for marijuana grow facilities is you can do it here, but you have to have water and sewer. And the nearest water and sewer is a mile away. If you want to run the line, we'll be happy to use the line. So that could be another option, is here's the area, but if you do it, you got to run the line. And speaking of is it Lake Shannon that doesn't have it yet? One of the most impressive demonstrations I saw when I was in Steuben County, which has 10 or 12 ski lakes in Indiana, which is really rare, is the health department guy would go take the dye to the toilet, flush it, and then you walk out and it's already in the water.
When the dams went out, we saw all the sewage running.
They did that.
We used to fly over that lake, and all the lakes were blue, and one of Lake Shannon was like a brownish green. It was like,
And
Disgusting.
And what you guys probably experience with the other lake is that once sewer comes, it's a lot easier for folks to get mortgages and invest and do new stuff there. So when it does come, be ready for it. All right, public services.
To take it all the way over to Lake Shannon, though, honestly, that's going to be a huge expense, isn't it? I mean, that's way down either Center or
What
Fawcett Road, and that's going to be that's
All the way to
multi-million-dollar.
They'll probably come up from the south.
Oh, yeah.
Well, but it still has got to go from Fawcett or Center over there, right? 'Cause
It would be coming from Old 23 down Fawcett.
Right. That's what I meant. Yeah, and going.
Potentially even south along Old Oak Creek, depending.
And
But,
you talk about all the way to Parshallville.
yeah.
it probably would be pressurized grinder pump system instead of a traditional gravity lift pump.
Still tens of millions.
That's how
right?
all of our lakes are right now. They're all
Tens.
pressurized.
Okay.
Tens of millions, yeah. Yeah, tens of millions. I would guess. I would
We have
guess.
very little gravity.
The DNR's probably gonna force that to happen.
Eventually.
At some point,
Well, it's 600 homes, so
Yep.
those are big houses out there.
you can afford it.
So on to public services. You guys are very peculiar that you have 3 different fire departments that cover your area, and we don't have the map here, but they have very different ISO rating. The kind of thing I want you to think about is the higher the number, the lower rating, and that means your house is more likely to burn down. Your insurance is going to be higher, so that's going to be something that kind of plays into where should the people go when we get to that phase. But folks are generally satisfied with what they've got. Not a lot of folks have had interaction, which is pretty good. In the couple comments, there was someone whose house burnt down. They were waiting for the fire truck to get there. They're probably in one of the 9 ISO areas. The folks that did have it were generally satisfied, except for the folks that house burnt down, obviously. Police services weren't quite as high as the fire, and that's pretty common because you tend to have less favorable interactions with the constabulary. But compared to some other communities, it was pretty high. There are some where there's a lot of tension between the police. One of the things from the comments, though, is that there is known areas where there's speeding or other issues, and folks think the response times are a bit too long. Code enforcement, and I think I even said this when we did it, is the least popular of all of those. It's the joke I like to share is it's the one thing where you know you can piss off both people, the person who wants something fixed and the person you're telling to fix something. So those are actually pretty good numbers. We expect them to be low. So there has been some questions that, the township does not, and correct me if I'm wrong, does not have like a weed ordinance. There's nothing on the book that says you can't have 3-foot tall weeds in your front yard.
No.
And that's a bit of a struggle. Rural communities, folks will move there because they don't want to be told what to do, but you don't want your neighbor to have 3-foot tall grass with a bunch of vermin running around. So that's the thing that I take from question 35 is that there are folks that are kind of interested in that when it gets to a certain level of badness. Now, what that level is, it's a struggle to find.
The difficulty that I see in a rural, semi-rural area is having to apply that evenly to all properties within the township. If a farm field, if there's an area that's wetlands or being unused, somebody can file a complaint and say, hey, Farmer Joe, you need to cut down your grass, same as they could their neighbor.
Yep.
And it's a struggle because of the variety of uses that we have in the township. We have so many different types of housing, different areas, high density, low density. Most of the higher density areas, associations have bylaws and things that will govern grass and weeds and things like that, but.
And then you get what's a weed?
Right. Right, it's basically just grass and
Some people think dandelions.
vegetation. Yeah, to each their own, right?
And
Well,
it can be a struggle. What I read from this is that there may be some interest in finding a right size version. So instead of saying no 3-foot tall grass, there are particular type of plants that are considered noxious that you can say, if these are growing, you got to take it down. The International Property Code has language where instead of like your entire lawn has to be cleared, the area around the house. I forget what the distance is. So if there is interest, there are ways to right size it and get it Tyrone Township sized. But it's not an easy thing because most of it is urban or suburban areas when you look for examples out there. The waste collection questions. I was not surprised by the amount of folks who want the freedom to pick their trash man.
I don't realize what they're doing with the roads.
Yes, and so this is one of the things where it's also useful to talk at the meeting, at the community visioning session, because it's a freedom that people get to feel every single week when they put the trash out. And if the government manages it through whatever means, by doing it itself or through a contract, and they knock the can over week after week, or you have to get the big thing, you're reminded of that annoying thing every week. The positive side is instead of having trash cans out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, because there are 5 different services, you're only going to see trash cans out 1 a day. You're going to have 1 set of trucks going instead of 5 set of trucks going. And another benefit is generally you're able to get your trash reduced by 25% or so, because quantity.
And you get like a fall cleanup in the spring.
Yep. And
less wear and tear on the roads.
Yep.
That's
And you know, Doug, I talked to Doug, he's service, he's in the spring, they were writing tickets for being over, the truck empty, he says, over the legal weight.
the full garbage truck is the same as a fully laden fire truck. They're not light.
They're not like.
Another advantage that I've seen in some communities, if you've got GFL or waste management or whomever else, and they don't pick up your trash as an individual homeowner, it's hard to get them to do anything. Whereas if you're the entire township with 5,000 accounts, you can call them and make stuff
Or
happen
you have
easier.
5,000 people that don't get their trash picked up for a couple weeks, like water for.
3 weeks, I have had my trash picked up. They pick up recycling every week. Haven't picked up my trash in 3 weeks, and I can't get them on the phone.
It's good and bad.
Yeah.
Good and bad of both.
Wonder if you can guess who that is. Which company?
Waste management?
Close. Yeah.
Oh,
GFL.
Is it?
I've had nothing but problems.
So what this has told me is that it requires more conversation of, here are the benefits of doing it this way,
Maybe not,
here are
maybe
the
people
costs.
do like this.
Yeah, but
So,
you gotta,
They do. Some do, some don't. Some subdivisions and communities that have associations, they will come to the township and create a special assessment district
exactly.
where there's one trash hauler. And there's several instances of that throughout the township.
My road, I can't believe the trucks that come down my road, the garbage trucks.
I guess my point is, people answered this question, why aren't we saying about the other questions? We need to explain more so that they'll change their
Well,
mind.
but they need to be
It'll all be
educated.
perfect.
It's not all educated people.
Yep, so this one, the reason why I bring that up specifically, and there are a couple of other ones, is your limited amount of space and a number of questions. So individuals, we didn't ask the question of if the township collected it, but you saved 25%, would you be in favor? If the township does it and they only did it 1 day a week instead of 5 days a week. So this again is kind of a laying the groundwork question to see.
The biggest issue is snowbirds. You got retirees here, they take off, they don't want to pay for garbage disposal year round. And that's the biggest issue
Yep.
there.
And if you,
It's a great point.
communities that have gone to single trash hauler poorly, it burns the community up. It'll destroy the community for a couple of years.
You know,
I've seen it, Scioto Township, they're on fire, it's a dumpster fire because they botched their rollout of the single hauler. But so it's,
you gotta go with the big people say.
yep,
Let's put that off till we get to the master plan done.
That's the biggest problem.
Well, like I said, you can just bring it up,
Garbage.
tell people
I mean, you can tell them what the benefits are,
what the
but.
benefits are, what the negative, positive, negative.
So if you didn't want to sign up for it, let me ask you this, because I take my trash to work, because I got a dumpster at work, I just take my garbage bag and throw them in the
So
dumpster
you
at work.
didn't want to pay for it.
Well, so would I get a bill if
there are all sorts of ways you can structure it. Especially in rural areas, if Zach had a magic wand, it would be there's one hauler or two haulers and the individual property owners can contract with them. So Dougie's would send out an invoice to you if you do it. And if you don't want it, you don't sign up, or you're in Florida for 6 months of the year, you're not paying for it.
that makes sense?
That's a lot. Cities, it makes sense to have it as kind of a monthly assessment or monthly fee on there, because there's less opportunities to do stuff. But for rural areas, especially because there's so many ag lots or undeveloped lots, I think having one or two and then the folks individually contract with them is the easiest way to have it.
I just hate seeing garbage cans on the road all week long. Get knocked over, garbage going everywhere.
One thing that I plucked out from the comments in public services, there are still a lot of areas where people are not happy with the internet. It's really challenging for local governments to affect that because there's a change in the Michigan telecommunication law where previously if a cable company, for example, came in or an internet company came in, you could negotiate with them. Like you have exclusive rights in the township for 5 years, and within 3 years you need to have service to everybody. And they say, well, we can't do that, we need to have 7 years, and you kind of monkey back and forth. The change at Lansing was you can't negotiate at all.
No, they told us that.
You can grant us the franchise and we'll pay you per user, or you cannot grant us the franchise and we'll come in anyways. So a lot of that leverage has lost, but a lot of folks still don't have access.
Well, Livingston County is one of the places that they've listed as one that's going to get more high-speed internet. And that's supposed to happen in the next 3 years.
Yeah. Well, and it's a bit outside the scope of this, but where is it? Just touching the southern side of Livingston County, Linden Township in Washtenaw County, they're extremely rural. There are like 1,900 people in the whole county. There's a bunch of parks and stuff. They couldn't get any service out there, including cell service, so they did a millage to run fiber to everyone's house. So you're in the middle of the woods, and you got lightning fast speeds, and they got their system in just before COVID, and they're kind of happy about that. They can't run the system, so they own it, but they lease it out to folks. That's kind of the extreme. But everyone got it, right to their door. All right, how are we doing on time?
How long are we gonna go tonight there, Rich?
We'd love to be done by 9.
Yeah, 9
Okay.
minutes. Yeah.
I'll try to speed it up.
We're roughly halfway.
We'll stop at
Not
9.
bad.
So my takeaway from the first two, transportation, is folks seem to think the road system in general and paved are pretty adequate. Same for the unpaved. Public transportation, folks thought were adequate, and so adequate there's not a lot of coverage, but that means there's also not a lot of demand. There are options to the Livingston County folks if you need to get to medical appointments, but non-motorized pathway, less folks thought it was adequate, but still I'm a little bit shocked at 35% because there's not really anything here. But again, if there's not demand for folks to ride their bikes, and there's no trails, then it matches demand. But a lot of the comments, folks did reference we want to be able to bike somewhere and not right on the edge of the road. Condition of paved roads, not very favorable, as one would suspect. Well, adequate is on the bottom end. Unpaved roads are worse, folks thought. Public subdivision roads are kind of a bit scattered. There are a lot of folks who don't drive on them, so they didn't know.
I suspect a lot of those went through public roads too.
Yeah, especially all the older ones.
The older subdivisions are all private.
Pathways, they would take people's land to make those pathways. I don't know if I would want that going through my property. I know there's a lot of support for it. I sure don't want people driving, just walking through my property.
Yep.
It's, the government coming and confiscate a piece of property, put a pathway through.
It's a great transition to the next question. We'll practice this ahead of time, folks. There was 64% support for public non-motorized pathways. Now, as mentioned, the detail of how you do it is really important. There are 2 plans from Livingston County to have one kind of the ITC, but that's going to be tough because there's an expressway running through the middle of it, and then one running north-south, kind of on the western edge by where the waters are over there. But this is pretty high support. I think a lot of folks got to see what's going on in Tyrone Township and Linden with that laugh path, and thought that was kind of neat. But the details on how you do it. Pretty high support for requiring internal sidewalks in new developments. Again, that's something that could translate directly into zoning code. You shall, so the kids don't have to play in the roads or whatever. Pathways along public roads. So this would be one of the things that you require folks, if they're doing a PUD or even just a regular site condominium, is like you shall put an 8-foot paved path on your property along the road. You're not right at the road, you want it back so folks aren't getting hit with stuff.
So that only work for PUD?
It could work.
Or could use it for CDO too?
Well, for PUD, that's one of the things that we incentivize. It's one of the 5 things that would allow for a density bonus.
But something that you could require, and in fact, Oxford Township, where I was at this today, they require it for any development. So if you're putting in a commercial development on a road that they have master plan for a pathway, you got to put that pathway in when you do your site plan. So like, I'm trying to think the storage unit. If you guys had a master plan, we want to have paths going these way, and they came in, you could say you got to put the path in. Or payment in lieu of path if you're kind of off on an island and there's not going to be a connection. But that was pretty high level support, considering you guys don't have any right now. Lesser support for public transit. I suspect those numbers will pop as the population ages and needs rides to their doctor's office, unless they build doctor's offices here. Traffic circles. I was a little surprised that there was a bit more support than opposition. And if you read through the comments, traffic circles are highly polarizing. Either they're the best thing since sliced ice or the worst thing since bag of broken
People learn
glass.
how to use them, they're not
I
bad.
think they're the best thing.
I love them, I mean, there's people just.
They don't work good if you go
Roundabouts, not traffic circles, because there is a difference.
Yep. And the thing that
Roundabouts they help.
they're a tool that work in some places but don't in others. So like a Sawzall is great for when you're destroying or doing demolition, but it's really bad if you're doing trim work.
I don't like the double one. I like the one they
The
got.
best example I can think is Green Oak Township, or where they have their mall and stuff. They put all
B-roads.
those roundabouts in. Those were horrible for years.
Yeah.
And in recent years, great.
Yeah, they
No problems,
they
just last
gave it a
year.
diet.
Yep.
Took a long time for people to get used to.
But now they got used to it
Yeah.
and traffic flows.
There's always that person
people going around.
There, yeah. You'll get those few people, but as we see more and more of them, they're adding it to the driver's training curriculum.
But those are some of the first ones out here.
Yeah,
The people
the
get more
first
used to it,
model.
they understand how to go. And
Oh, yeah.
you even got one over there at exit 80 now. You
Yep.
know, it's like, oh, let's start going, look to the left, and when it's clear, go.
I think we need one at Denton Hill and White Lake Road. I mean, they pull out for me all the time there.
The problem is just the amount of land you actually
I-
need to
That's what I'm
put
saying,
that
is
in.
you can't. Just-
That's the challenge. It's great around like freeways where you have large rights of way and, additional land that you can put them in, but.
So one of the exercises we're likely to do is to ask the question of if you could if you had a magic wand and could drop a traffic circle, where would you drop it? Just to get those ideas, and that can be something that if there is need, you can point to this as support to get the money, because they're not cheap. And for example, Washtenaw County, they have money to do 2 a year in the entire county. And my one fun thought on that is in Dexter City, we got 2 roundabouts right kind of in the schools on the main street, and I'm a little disappointed, I think it's been 5 years now, that none of the high school students have realized they get 8 of their friends, they can just drive around the thing and totally shut down traffic as long as they have gas. They haven't figured it out yet.
I do, as far as things, so talking about road improvements, when they did Running Lake Road, all my friends that now on the planning commission are like, oh, they love it. They absolutely love it. They think it's great. They're like, this is what, we want the township to do. They're very, very, very happy with that.
Some of the blacktop.
Yeah, they're just ecstatic about it. They live on Runyon Lake and they think it's just the best thing. So I think you get a ton of support for that.
Yeah, it leads into this.
Even more so
Yeah,
about,
let's see.
Yeah.
if you could take that against a traffic circle.
Well, and that a very nice transition. So we kind of asked what type of things you like. And now we asked the money question because infrastructure isn't cheap.
Yep.
And I was surprised at how many folks would support a road millage dedicated to road improvements. Rural communities generally you don't want any additional stuff, but seeing what was done out here, folks I suspect are like that's kind of nice. I would caution that if you do that, make sure you have a plan and you can show what you're doing and that you maximize your money against grants and road
Because everybody assumes your road is gonna be first.
Yep.
Comes through.
I was also surprised at the support for a millage dedicated to non-motorized. Not quite as high, but still high for the fact that you guys don't have any. There was decent support for park and ride that you don't have any here. This may be, you try to work out to get this an official.
Part of the golf course.
Isn't that MDOT's responsibility to pay for that?
I get it, right here.
Like I'm thinking of the west side of White Lake Road, where they always park all that equipment and do road work. Couldn't MDOT build one there?
Yep.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. That's ideal. People always
You're
park
right,
there
that
anyways.
is-
Yeah, it's DOT property, let them pay for it,
You look at the one down on Old 23 in Heartland Township,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
used all the time.
all the time.
Halfway
And-
full or more.
We asked this so that you guys as a township could do an ask, like, hey, there's a bunch of people commuting, people want this.
But the problem with our township officials, like I brought that up with power roads and stuff, they don't seem to work, we can't do it, we don't have the, or the know-how, or we don't talk to these state officials or federal officials to get these things done. And if we don't have the people in here that's willing, I know they're busy, but this will better help our community.
My opinion, if one of the main benefits of the survey is it's not only great for master plan, but for all other aspects of government, really. So if they look at this data and they determine, wow, there really is a significant demand,
Figure out.
then maybe they can consider, adding a millage to the ballot for that purpose.
Well, like I
Because currently
said,
we-
DOT, we gotta get a hold of states. Why should we pay the funds?
For that aspect.
I mean, we're already paying enough money for fire trucks out there.
But Ross, would we have to pay for the MDOT?
Not for.
That I don't know, I don't think so.
That's just fine.
No.
Well,
No,
the
and there-
county commissioners actually are the ones who make the decisions
Oh.
on road.
That's federal.
I was referencing like the millage for road improvement. in
Tyrone
general.
Township has about this much authority.
No, I mean-
We're given money but very little, and then we have to match it up to 50% to get things
Even
repaid.
though, something like that?
Well, when they redid those two, not to get off track, but those two parking rides on either side of Spencer Road there in Brighton. I mean, they redid those and those are really nice now. Who paid for that?
That's.
MDOT as part of their project.
Well, how did
That's
Brighton
interesting.
Township get that to happen?
I think MDOT just did it on its own.
Oh.
So it would require some work, but there are some different models, so,
So they put in all kinds of new curbing and
Oh, those are nice lots.
really nice, yeah.
there can be, a lot of places, Meyer will be a park and ride. So they have way more parking, and they'll do it on a corner, so that may be something you could also formalize with the golf course if folks are already doing that. There's some benefits, so Meyer likes it because people are there twice a day, that wouldn't otherwise be there twice a day, but so the good thing is it starts a conversation and sees that there is some support and interest. On any other thoughts on the transportation element that were shocking or that you want to ask more about that we haven't already identified? All right, on to Parks and Recreation, and folks are aware, as you look in the comments, that there's not much here unless you own property on a lake or a river. And so,
Does that mean they're saying that there's opportunities? Does that mean there's possibilities, or they're just on properties?
so the folks I've talked to when I was testing this is they look at it as they can get to it, not necessarily in here.
Or I look at possibilities as it's possible for us to get parking. We have areas that we could get and develop. That could be a different road.
Yep. It was, for me, really interesting to see where the folks go for the recreation. A lot of state parks, as you would suspect, the parks in the nearby communities, so kind of if you're thinking, where would the pathways go to connect? That's kind of a target. Let's see. County park, so we know they're not coming in Tyrone Township for a county park, because you guys are the one without one. Alright.
On that though, is that addressed later or at some point? The township.
That you don't have,
Well, having a township. park.
yeah, it's in the public facilities.
Further back, okay.
Yep. Alright, so we've got lots of fabulous ideas of the parks that folks are going to. I'm not familiar with all of them, but it's kind of neat that the ones that I am, you can see what the nature of the parks. Are they going to play pickleball? Are they going to just hang out by some water? So question 49, that's where we start the various types. And this was a bit more vague. It wasn't, would you support money for these different types? Because different communities have different interests. If there are things nearby, you don't want to duplicate it. And if you're an older community, you probably don't want a lot of rollerblade courts, right?
Skateboard parks.
Yep. So there is very strong support for a township park.
Pickleball's a big thing too. We found that out.
Oh, you have no idea.
I know, believe me.
A county park as well, and you guys are one of the, I think, the only township without a county park at this
Yes.
point, which their master plan recognizes. Subdivision Park was a little lower, and for me that was a bit, I think if it had been more described that if someone's putting a site condominium, you could say, you shall put in a park. Now, maybe it's just open to the residents, but you could dictate that based on the size of the thing or how many units or whatever.
No, when they developed on my lake, lots 1 through 12, they have a lot that's unbuildable. They designated a park, just all wetland.
Yep.
Designated a park. That was on 67.
Support for pathways, I kind of touched on that already. For lake access, in my experience has probably been the folks on the lake are probably in the opposed or strongly opposed. The folks not on the lake are probably in the strongly support or support.
With the DNR and all the controls on the lakes, is that anything that is even up to us? Or is that already set in stone,
No, you're
you
not
can't
gonna do
even debate it?
They're not gonna-
It's a very heavy stone to roll up the hill.
Yeah, I would think so.
The,
Let's put a DNR launch on Lake Shannon and see how that
Yeah,
goes.
already like.
yep, or even just a picnic park. It better be a spot where there aren't houses or where there's a long distance to houses from a practical standpoint. But what this does show is that there is some sort of support for folks who want to get to the water, because it's unique and it's,
No keyhole, there's no keyhole anymore anyway.
It hasn't been for 40 years plus.
more support for river access. I suspect some of the lake folks probably popped to support on this. So kayaking, there's the Shiawassee River Trail that's pretty popular. It's a little bit different, a little bit easier to do access for rivers than lakes. Really high support for nature preserves. You've got a couple of them already privately done.
Exact, real quick, go back to 49F.
Mm-hmm.
Ross, hey, river access, on the Shiawassee that goes like down through Center Road net, is there any spot where we could do at least a county kayak launching area in there? 'Cause
Well,
that would be really cool.
Yeah, right on Linden Road there. We used to launch,
Is there something that we have there?
we used to take the Boy Scouts and launch in right there on Linden Road where it crosses over.
From the right of way into the water body?
Yeah,
Right there
and
was.
then, and it's right across from the golf course there, the back end of the
Yeah,
preserve.
you talk about the
South
Cloud
of-
Hill is there.
Yeah, and
Linden,
then we would canoe through the, all the reeds and rushes and stuff, but you get into
South of
Wessington.
that lake,
and then-
right?
Yeah, end up at
Stern
Lake.
Lake.
is there a launch there?
Well, I guess it depends on what you consider a
Well, I mean,
launch.
it's-
Can you put a canoe in or a kayak? Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not.
Well, this might be a good thing for the visioning session.
Yeah.
Well, my point is, I'm not trying to get off track here, but I'm just thinking that, things that are worth talking about, that would be something that I think would be actually
That's a damn good idea.
really cool.
I assume somebody owns that property there. It's
Well, if
not-
we could,
There is a good,
it kind of combines the county park with the water thing with,
but there is a law, a floating log, if you can go down that,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
you can use it, but you can't get on the property.
well, that's the problem.
But we
You
gotta get
to
the
it.
property on the river.
That's the issue.
Well, and this would be the very starting of the journey. So you may say we want to have a public access point there. It's privately owned now. And you could work with them of, we want to buy this from you, or we want to buy the rights from you, or if you sell, when you sell it, we want to get it. So it's not a short thing, it's a longer.
We just use eminent domain and condemn it.
I think that, to me, that's one thing, that all of a sudden we talked about tonight, that's one thing on the
But
river.
would that
The lake
fall,
isn't gonna happen, there's no
No.
way that.
would that fall into keyholing if you bought a lot?
But this
Put a
is
park
something
on it?
that could be really beneficial to the community.
Not necessarily.
And I like the kayak, it'd be great to have another spot to drop in.
Mhm.
And, you might have dropped in there, I go to Linden and drop in behind the
Yep.
funeral home
I
there.
used to go on Stearns Lake all the time, it was good fishing.
Beautiful back there, and it'd be nice if there was some public access back
You
there.
can-
This
you
one,
can
the
park on road.
sports field report, I was surprised
That's
at
kind
how
of
high
where I
that
get
was.
these too.
Especially based on the age of the applicants, but I suspect a lot of that was pickleball pushed up. It's a lot easier to do pickleball than a lot of other active courts, and there were a lot of comments on pickleball. Another thing that surprised me was the high level of support for recreation programs. That was just kind of a lob it to see if anything sticks on the wall. And the schools are running the recreation programs now, right? The various, okay.
We didn't ask about playgrounds, so I think we got one.
And that's one of the holes that we can, if there's thought that may be important, we can do that as part of the visioning section too. I didn't put it on here for space because it's just looking at demographics. Another one that surprised me was the level of support for millage dedicated to parks and recreation. I said very rural areas tend to not want any extra, and the fact that it was, if the folks who did the survey were the folks voting, it would pass.
Well, we didn't ask about it, community center could be involved in that too.
Yep. So that's kind of a side conversation that would flow through a recreation plan, not necessarily a master plan, but we had eyeballs, so we wanted to ask it. On to natural resources then, or is there anything else that popped out to folks or things that you think we need to explore that we haven't?
Positive part for technical water.
Yes, and that's what we were expecting, because lakes and rivers are important here.
Especially with that PFAS.
Even more for groundwater, that makes sense when folks get their drinking water from the ground. Woodlands, not as much. Wetlands, not as much, but still very high. Undeveloped natural areas. Working farms, these are all very high support for. Even dark skies, which is a term that not everyone knows, had pretty high support.
I had a number of inquiries on that.
Like, what the heck is...
Yeah.
And then there's the guy who's like, I have an observatory in my backyard, this is awesome.
Yeah.
But it makes sense, all of these things tie into keeping an area rural.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's right, Rich.
Yeah.
The city lights.
So actually for me, the level of support for dark skies with it being not a very well-known term, that was surprising that it was that high.
Why wasn't it defined, dark skies?
I think
It's not a well-known term.
people know, I think.
It's a
I think
common
actually
term,
know
it's a
what it is.
fairly new concept.
It is.
Right,
no, it's going-
but there's room to say, if you think people didn't know.
It wasn't going well, that goal is to see.
Myself personally, I've had at least 3 people inquire about it, and I'm assuming that there were other questions in the department as well, and they reached out to Zach, so.
Well, and sometimes we ask questions to see if folks know about it. And so because we got a number of questions in there, that means if we talk about dark skies, we have to take the time at these meetings to describe it a bit more. And so that, again, I'm thinking ahead to zoning ordinance in the future, is that gives you a lot of support to saying, especially for commercial, we want to limit your light. A more interesting conversation is, do you want to limit it for single-family residential? So there are some spots by Traverse City where they say if you've got a light fixture outside your house, it needs to be the full cutoff. Can't be pointing light up, it has to be pointing down, because they've...
Do we have the resources to enforce that?
Right now, we have a regulatory ordinance, which would encompass all residential properties in the township. We have specific standards for lighting.
We do.
Yes, we do.
But it is based on complaints. We don't go out and measure everyone's light at their property line. If someone has an excessively bright light, file a complaint. We have an ordinance to address it. If it's beyond the value that we allow for, we enforce.
Well, if you put a development on 23, after the stores close after a certain hour, they can dim the lights down to a certain degree too. Just shut it down halfway or something.
Yeah, and that's going to be a zoning ordinance thing.
That's what I'm saying, but that would help darken the skies.
Absolutely.
Another thing that I was a bit shocked on is the relatively high level of support for millage dedicated to purchase of development rights to preserve those things, especially without a plan. So communities will have a plan before they ask for a millage, and the fact that that number is so high without any plan and just the vaguest thing is, for me, a bit breathtaking. But it makes sense because people have said earlier on that these things are important. That's why we live here. That's why we moved here.
Well, if they're looking at it as, we want these things to reduce overpopulation, then it all kind of adds up.
And if it is done well, a field or a forest does not draw a lot of public service money.
Right.
And so a 40-acre outlot with deer and some corn is going to be more beneficial financially too than having 4 10-acre houses on it in the balance sheet. Were there any other natural resources things that popped out to other folks that we didn't discuss or question you'd like us to elaborate on?
Google it.
All right.
Dark skies, I mean,
No, I was just
Google
noticing.
it.
yeah.
Someone asked the question.
Yep.
She said you can get it, look it up.
So communication, it's not really related to the master planning. It's kind of for the internal goings on of the township. Unless there are any objections, I'll skip it and let you guys sort that out internally. The quick takeaway is that folks are interested, at least the folks who responded are interested in knowing what's going on, which is a good sign. There's the observation that Rome, men don't love Rome because she's beautiful because men love it. People saying they want to know what's going on is saying they love it and they want to be involved. So that's a very good thing here. For quality of life, these are kind of nebulous ones that can kind of feed a lot of different areas. Folks are generally satisfied with the sense of community, not as much for the access to parks, most likely because they have to go somewhere else. The variety, and again, the way I'm reading that is that they can get to different types around them. Folks are generally satisfied with employment opportunities and variety in the area. Access to shopping. You guys really are, you can go 6 miles either way.
We got plenty of stuff.
Restaurants, again, relatively satisfied. Entertainment, relatively satisfied. Educational opportunities, relatively satisfied. Garbage recycling, so ran through it very quickly. So what it says to me is when you guys get to the future land use map is you don't need to worry about providing a lot of space for entertainment or restaurants or those things because people are generally happy, right? They just said, we're satisfied with what we've got. Doesn't mean you don't program space for any, but don't worry about, oh my gosh, where are we going to put 10 restaurants? Because people really like restaurants because they're not starved for restaurants. All right, that's the rundown. It was a lot of responses. Again, it's a fun thing. Set it down, reread it. There are a lot of jewels in the text comments. A quick question for you guys. Don't have to answer it now, but start to consider is, do you want to have this as an appendix to your master plan?
Why not?
It makes it this thick. Now, my follow-up question is if you want it to be in there, it could be raw just like this, or we can condense them.
I would condense it.
I
Can
would
we
disagree.
condense it after we do the
I think keeping it raw, it just shows the responses. I mean, let people gather their own conclusions.
Could we also keep it as a separate document that we
Yeah,
also
this
have
is the
available?
survey. Here it is.
And once we get to the
We
workshop.
paid for it. I think it should be available, and people can look at it as a archived document.
Yeah.
But I think the main question is, does it get attached as part of the master plan as an appendix, or do we keep it as a separate document that can also be?
It should be, I would say, a separate document on our website.
Yeah.
It makes
The master
sense.
plan is pretty thick
Yeah.
as,
It's gonna be a lot.
as it
Yeah.
goes. And if we're not gonna do it as a reduced document, then attaching it as a whole document by itself, I think you wanna keep that by itself. I mean, you can put that out on the webpage any place you want. I mean, as it is, people will have to go there to see the new master plan document.
But no one's
Put it
gonna
right
print it.
below.
It's just an electronic document. It's just another PDF at the back end of this thing. I don't see why you wouldn't have it. I personally like it as to me, it's like like the the syllabus or whatever at the end of the document.
So, the thing that would be nice if it was separate, Steve, like if you go onto the website and you see, hey, the master plan, and it's 180 pages, right, let's say. And I'm just hypothetically, but if you had another link that said, hey, 2022 survey
Then
results,
okay.
you think it might be
Okay, you
easier
wanna-
to say, hey, I just want to see the survey.
That would be fine as long as we had a direct connection to the.
Yeah.
Because to me, we spent 30-some thousand, or no, that was for a whole entire.
Yeah, the survey wasn't, it looks like it's 30,000.
It does. I mean, it's like, wow.
No,
this
but
is expensive.
to me, like, to make it easy
Okay.
to get to, right, so you're not,
At least
Hey,
we
where do I
have a direct
find this?
link
It's
to
in
this,
here.
to this document. If we have a direct link to it, then fine. Have it as an appendage that's a link.
We have the master plan in several places throughout our website, but just under township ordinances, we have master plan visioning session workshop summary from 2012. Then we have the master plan 2012 next. we could simply just put our new
Yeah, just-
master plan, new visioning session.
I wouldn't
and
want,
save
yeah, I
this.
wouldn't want us to try to condense this down into something, because I think it's
Oh, I
beneficial
agree.
to keep every comment in here, so somebody can look through it. I just think people gave the comment, let's
Plus
have
a bunch
a
of different visiting sessions.
Right.
And
And
one
one-
there too.
One thing, if I could, I don't know if, go ahead, Zach, finish what you're saying.
No.
My only comment, one thing I got out of this for me personally tonight is the idea that we could actually have a kayak or a canoe launch
Yeah.
on Linden Road. I think it's the most exciting thing I've heard in this whole thing. I think it'd be awesome. I'd love to try it personally. I didn't know we had that opportunity, and I would really like some property.
Well, right now, we don't know.
Well, hey, you know, maybe that's like, maybe, you know, I mean, a roadside park that's an acre and a half, where you could
You
put
do,
6 or 8
you know, there's a
cars.
state launch up there on Argentine. Well,
Yeah,
probably
I
you
kayak
can,
all around here.
but you didn't just let me know for now.
I've never
You
been
could
to
go
the
right down
township.
through that whole system right there.
I just think it'd be a really
I'm
nice
just letting you
thing.
know.
It just,
You can do it backwards. And up there.
I think kayaking is the.
But it'd be nice to
When you
have-
think up north, rural character, rural field, what do you see when you go up north? You see public access on rivers all over.
And when you jump on these rivers around here, it's a totally different feel. It's so.
That's just a thing to think of. Handle
I'll buy the property across the street.
Well, that's my point. We gotta be able to provide parking, and maybe it's 10 spots or something.
Zach, did you have more stuff?
Not on that. I do want to touch maps
Yeah,
since
for
they're a
sure.
bit different.
I'd like to
So
something.
they are a bit different. We formatted them. You guys wanted to have the surrounding context, so we got those in there. We lessened that the township border so you can see things.
Which one are you on?
I'll work with whatever we got there. So existing land use, there are still a couple of gray kind of vacant ones.
Yeah, Zach,
And I still
for
need to
the
get you my
maps-
data on that.
Yep.
For the maps, we can go quickly over some, but what I think would be better if all the PC is here.
Yep.
Majority of it when we look at them, so we don't.
And I still have to
Miss
get them back some
something.
data too from my
Yeah,
department
so,
that's.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So just, I guess the big question is that, does the general format feel better to your eyes than what you'd seen before with the extension out the borders?
Yes, yeah, then it
Okay.
really shows, hey, what are we up against in each area.
All right. I guess just scroll down and I'll work with whatever you got.
They're all separate.
Oh, they're all separate?
Yep.
Okay, the existing zoning, again, just updated to match the same format. It's a lot easier to read when it doesn't have that massive wall on there. Locational map, went all the way to Detroit.
I like that one.
Yeah, that's nice.
And this, we've been kind of operating on the maps. It takes a lot of effort to get them to read cleanly on an 8.5 by 11. This is kind of a decision point of if you're still comfortable with this being the things in the actual document, or if you want the larger sheets, the 11 by 7, kind of the rotated. I'll tell you the advantage of having it this format is it's a lot easier to print and view the document because it's all the same size. You don't have to worry about weird section stuff. Ross, if someone asks for it, can just hit print and it'll print off.
Or email electronic version that you can zoom in on. But
Yep. Now,
One
go ahead.
I was gonna say, one thing I would like to see on a map is the locations of the township parks in Livingston County.
Yeah.
county parks,
How about all
or
launches?
just all parks in general.
No,
County,
I'm
state.
talking about ones that, each township has there's at least one park in each one of the townships except here. Now, whether they call it a township park or not, I know where the one is in Cohocton, I know where the one is in Deerfield. I'm trying to remember what the one just west of Deerfield is.
Lucy? No?
I know where the one in Osceola is.
On Typical Lake Road.
But I don't know where all the rest of them are.
Is that something that'll be pertinent for the master plan, or is that something that we want to branch off into if we were to do a parks plan?
Yeah. I think, not so much pertinent for the master plan, but if we get into the parks piece, it would be interesting to know where those
Yep, and actually our Parks nerd is compiling a map on GIS that has all of the different parks, basically the entire SEMCOG region. So if someone wants to pull it up, we can just,
Yeah, I mean, because, there's Silver Lake Park up in Fenton, and there's all kinds of other ones.
So that can include like private, like nature preserves.
Not
Yeah.
everybody in the township knows where all those are at. Same with boat launches.
I would like to know the boat launches.
Natural
Well, we don't have
features.
any right now.
I
Well,
know.
we're talking about surrounding communities.
Oh, yeah.
Because we got surrounding communities on the map.
I have a boat and I have no idea what to, where's how to probably guess. Yeah.
This is just updated to the current format. It's got
Yeah.
the wetlands, the trees, the wetland soils. What you got next?
Roads.
Road surfaces. And this was, we got this information right from Livingston County Road Commission, so it should be accurate. I hope it's accurate because this is what they tell the state. But give it a look.
Public roads, right there, just public,
These are actually
That's
All roads?
all.
all?
Yeah.
the ones that are private, as I'm looking at it, are classified as not available.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and noodle on it.
That was at one time a county road that was abandoned by the county. So
Okay.
it's existing and it's private.
We have to pull that map may have not got it on there. We'll double check on that. There are lots of road maps. There's a lot of information on roads. One of the things that you asked last time, I don't think it got into this batch of maps, but there is the Paiser rating.
It is in there.
Is it in there?
I saw
Okay, I
it.
just didn't print it out. Soil types. So where this is useful in feeding, and there are some communities that say you can do a solar farm, but not on prime farmland. So you've just documented where your prime farmland is, and so you've got the resource where folks can go
It's available off the
to not look, or to develop an overlay. If you want to say, here's where solar farms can go. This isn't the prime farmland map, there's another one, but
Yeah.
that was looking at the different areas,
Yeah.
because there are probably going to be different strategies. It's the same, we've shifted it from what your current master plan is to match the roads. This is really, yeah, this is the farming, the good farming. And what I'm actually going to do with this, unless there are any objections, is instead of having, I want to have it scaled. So like the dark green is the best, and then the light green is the next best, and then the lighter green is the next best, and the red is the, you can't farm there. So the area is going to stay the same, just the colors are going to be a little bit different. And actually, I try to get rid of red as often as possible so that colorblind folks can still read it and not get so angry. So the color, it'll probably still be red, but it'll be a slightly different shade density from the greens. You got the giant hill of loamy sand right there.
What road's that?
That is-
That's Maple Hill.
That's just the other side of my house.
It's a gravel pit.
No, it's probably right by my
It would be
house.
great for gravel
The
pit.
gravel's a little bit further north.
Which one?
It's right by my house.
Might also make a nice little ski hill if someone wanted to buy a bunch of
Wait,
acres.
where are you talking, where is
Well,
that?
that's
Where the red is, that's the hill.
That's the hill.
Kandahar was there, wasn't it?
What are the roads?
The old Kandahar, Steve,
I'm right there where Sullivan Lake is.
which is now top
Right
of the
across the
pines.
street from my house.
Pines of-
Down Pines.
It's top of the pines now. It was formerly Kandahar, and there was a ski hill there.
Right. Yeah.
That is right there, yeah.
It used to be called
There was.
Summit.
It was abandoned for residential use.
All right, so it's fun to start a conversation immediately. School districts,
Oh, man.
the big thing is we changed it to match the school colors. And actually, the guy who did the map was super excited about that. And he actually wanted to go to try to figure out how to emboss the school mascots in the back color. That if that shows up there, you'll know he had extra time at the computer. Just
Yeah, that should be a little more orange for fentanyl.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
kind of yellowy, huh?
Yeah, I don't like that. It's my kid's movie.
Okay, we'll make that note. How about is that the proper linden red and the
Yeah,
Heartland blue?
Heartland blue, yeah.
Okay.
Put some tiger stripes on the line.
Okay. It's the little details. And then traffic counts, again, this is from the road commission, they're fairly recent. There's a lot of data, I don't know that it shows really well, so the next version will probably be a little bit different, like playing around with making the numbers bigger.
but again, if it includes, these are 2021 and 2022,
Mm-hmm.
which also include COVID.
COVID, yeah.
So the traffic counts would be down no matter what we do, unless we pick 2019 as a.
Although I suspect, so when they're calculating the annual average daily traffic, they put the thing across there for a week and they count the number and they've got math to calculate for, this is summer, we know traffic's gonna be different versus when school's in session.
But if everything was closed in 2021 for a while, and everything was closed in 2020, they could have had that out for days and not had more than 3
Yeah, I
cars.
know in my area, in the time when things were shut down, traffic increased for sure.
Did
Did
it?
it? Absolutely, because there's more people that were at home
Yeah.
in that area, right?
Mhm.
And
You
so
didn't have to drive to work, so you go somewhere.
So I can check and see if they corrected for COVID, because there are some spots that they'll put the little bumps out every year. So they can see this year versus last year, if it's different, if it's dropped off a cliff.
Yeah,
or
well, it's fine
exploded.
just as long as people are aware of the fact that this may have to be adjusted for COVID.
So you're thinking, look into it and add a little asterisk if we're including that data?
Yeah. The other thing that would be interesting too,
What's a
and
pretty
I
busy road?
forget the other thing that was interesting.
Where's
You-
some of the expressway?
Do you have a map of the proposed internet system for Livingston County? That one just
I
came
do
out.
not, no.
I just saw that probably 2 weeks ago. And it got sent to me by the planning chair in
That could be
Livingston
probably
County.
right.
Okay, I've got her email, I can give her a shout.
But it simply might be helpful for people who come and say, hey, my internet sucks. Well, okay, this is where they're proposing to make infrastructure changes that's
So
coming.
they're not doing the whole county?
Yeah, I
They're
don't-
trying to expand it through as much as the county as
I thought
possible.
you said earlier they're gonna do the whole county.
In the long term, yes, but it's a,
So it's just phases.
All right, is that it for maps?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So I guess I'd like to be prepared for anything we can get questions.
Mm-hmm. And my aim is to have the maps that we'll have on larger format so we can circle and point and do those types of things.
Yeah.
But we're starting at 6 or 5?
Next Thursday?
Yeah.
we'll be here at
5 to start setting up,
Okay.
5:30 open to the public, and 6 is when it starts. Yep, with the goal of
When do you want us to
finishing
be
at
here?
about 5:30 if you can, or as close to that. We know there's a bit of a drive and 23 is 23.
Yeah.
I won't be here on Thursday because I have another meeting on Thursdays that regularly occur in Oxford Township. So you get the A-team for that. We got a couple folks who do a lot of these visioning sessions, so it's actually kind of exciting that they get to come here and look at it with fresh eyes and engage with folks. The last couple updates I have for the master plan is we've got, you don't have it because this was enough for you already, revisions to the housing article, the transportation article, where we've incorporated survey stuff.
Okay.
Couple of the neat things from housing that wasn't there last time is we have arm's length sales information for the township going back to 2006. So we've got, you can look at it on the acreage, on the square footage, the median price, the average price, It's a really neat thing that not a lot of communities have in their master plan that's nerdy to see. We have additional information from the mobile home parks for the types of dwelling units. And I'll just show this to Ross, but so there you guys are. Single family house, that's your mobile home.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what's going on in City of Linden, they have a higher percentage, but you guys aside from City of Linden are the biggest of all your surrounding communities. So again, that seems like a very small detail, but that's really big backstop if someone comes in and tries to sue you.
What is the, how long will the visiting session last? What is the plan?
The plan is 2 hours.
And is that generally sufficient?
Our experience has been if it's too long, well, so if it's too long, folks will want to come out and it can start to drag.
Right.
There's another thing called a charrette session, which is basically like 8 to 12 hours where you're there and you're really intense. That's a slightly different thing. It's more design focused. So like Fenton might want to do that for downtown part of their master plan. But so our goal is to keep it how to describe it?
So
Like
we don't have
you're,
a hard stop then? I
yeah.
mean, I don't want this thing, just thinking about it trailing on for
The
hours.
the activities are going to have a hard stop, but we plan to be here another hour just to talk with people and listen to them. But the activities will hard stop at 8.
That's good.
For 24
The point is probably to have somebody that's good at facilitating, right, to keep
Yep.
people on.
I describe it as playing volleyball on a hot beach. You keep moving and you try not to dwell.
And who's facilitating?
Mr. Lewan will be one. I'm not sure. He's the vice president of Carlisle Wortman. Been doing this for a long, long
So you're
time.
gonna have how many different, so you're gonna have different rooms for different visiting sessions?
Yep, we're gonna have.
I wanna be on, I wanna know what's going on with all of them. I don't wanna just go to one.
Well, then you have to come back on Saturday.
Oh, bull crap, that's not right. We didn't have to do this in the
Zach,
master
do you
plan
need
last time.
anything else from us? For
Went like
any
a
other
mile.
updates? on
Yeah.
Master plan?
Nope, if there are any specific things that you want us to address that we hadn't discussed now, send them along. Like I said, we do have folks who are really good at facilitating, and I'm gonna get them the notes and talk with them, so they'll have a pretty good idea.
And so, you guys have anything else? We can
I don't think we have any new business. We
go
A lot of
next
good
meeting.
information.
Miscellaneous.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, it's been, for sure. No new business, so call the public. All right, go ahead.
So the visiting center is gonna be one, he'll do one, and another day somebody will do another one? Or
So there are,
separate, you'll have all different visiting centers.
yep, and we can get you the kind of the outline. So the idea is that there's some big group stuff at the beginning where everyone's together, and then there'll be separate, the room will break into 2, and there'll be 3 different sessions just because of time, because we want to keep it.
So she's interested in different things, but I'm different, I'm interested in 4 or 5. I'm only gonna go pick 1 or 2.
You get to do 3 of them. So there's 6
I have no
separate.
say in nothing else that goes on in the master plan?
No, you can always provide written comments or,
How do I know what's going on in the visiting center if I'm not there to make comments? I don't know, I did this before. This was not how we did the master plan. Went through the whole thing, it just got discussed as we went along. You're dividing people, you're not gonna have that many people anyway, I can see that right now. Anyways, how many duplicate people that you surveyed?
we,
I mean, if you had 300 people, if there was 10 people that did 100 surveys,
we only found one that had duplicate IP address. And when we went through, so the township provided us with the code of here are the codes we're sending out for the different properties. It was a case where it was like husband and wife and they owned multiple properties. So that was the only time there were 2 IP
so
addresses.
you only got one, there wasn't a lot.
No, there was,
All right, I already asked about the sewers, with the support, okay. Now, when we get to the visiting centers, we got, we're gonna have to break it up and find out what people want,
But there's nothing that'll keep people from going from one to the other, right? You're not.
But yeah, but you wanna be involved in
But I
certain
know, but
aspects.
you can move around. There's.
Yeah, you can move around, but you're not really taking in what other people are saying. You know what I'm saying? You wanna know what's going on. I'm not
I
trying
think it's gonna be that business
Well,
guy.
That's what I'm trying to say, so if you only got one person over here, it just, whatever. These, properties, we're gonna, you talk about in-laws and stuff like that, I'm really worried about people using them for rental properties. That's something we're gonna have to really work on at the visiting centers. They might use it for their in-laws right now, but later on, they might rent out to somebody, a room, so, and the neighbors. Property township, we don't have no visioning or anything for what's the future of our township? Other than the survey, we got property here, we really didn't have much say in the township at all, in the sale of the property, just went through so quick. I'd like to know, I'll ask Jennifer, if I ask Mike, it's like you can't get nothing out of them, what's the future? They want to save this over here for future development. What's the future development? Do they ask the people? Do we ask the people? What do we want to do with the property? We haven't done that yet. Like I said, I never seen property move, this township hall move. I remember the meeting that we had, and Mike asked the question, I think we need a new hall, and people said no, and said, yeah, well, it's a good idea. Next thing I know, big bang boom, there wasn't much discussion with the people on it. And, I'd like to know what the future is for our township, our property, now the benefits, I think you guys answered your own question, the benefits for not having all these big taxable income developments is our property values go up. And I'm willing to pay a couple $1 more in taxes not to have that. So we were talking earlier about, you can put these things in here, you're gonna get a big dollar tax. Well, and Kurt brought that up, he says, it's a trade-off. We don't want it. We got it down here, we got it down here. And I think in the survey, the people said that. I know you brought that up. But I know you keep reiterating, we got a good tax, it's like the sewers, it's tax, it's income. And I don't look at it that way, I don't want the headache. I don't want the asphalt plan, it's the wear and tear on my road, it's the boom, 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 bang, bang, bang through my front yard.
Yeah.
And, to me, it's worth a couple $1 more in tax money than to put up with all that.
And I'm
I think the survey is telling us that.
talking about that a lot because it's a very substantial change from your current master plan.
Yeah.
As far as the town hall goes, I was not on the board or anything when that happened, but I remember when they read, and this is only what I read in the paper, but when they bought this building, it's opposed to spending $3.5 million on their township hall. They got this for $1 million. To me, that was like, wow, that's great corporate governance.
Yeah,
They did a
but
great
now we're
job.
spending $250,000 for 3 parking spots. So we didn't say, I'm sorry.
Big deal.
There's a couple that's part of our scope
That's a
here.
good point.
That
So,
means,
is there more public comment? Yeah. Go ahead.
No, we can have it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Jeanette Ropetta, Fuller Drive, and I do represent quite a few people with my group, Township Watch. So, I was accused after last board meeting that, you and Scott are crazy, you're wackadoodle, you need to tone it down. This was all by your newest planning commission member that was just appointed. So, first of all, though,
Who said this? Now, this is the first I heard of this, and that was at the last meeting.
Letter.
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, okay, and first of all, I do want to thank you for a really great meeting. I
Yes.
honestly commend you, I think it was really great. Love the way that you were back and forth, and, sometimes we were talking a little too much, but you guys were great in including us, and we were able to kind of participate and get some answers. That was really, really appreciated, and so thank you for that. Sorry, I'll try to be really quick. Tell me if I have to stop. There's my number 1. So last board meeting, you were, a new planning commission member was appointed. I went up to him after the meeting, I didn't know who he was, I extended my hand and I said, hey, my name's Jeanette, welcome. And he says, oh, I know who you are. I said, have we met before? He said, no, you're the one that you've been lying about me, saying that I said burn down the building. So we all got together and he talked. So I just want you to know, because if you guys don't know who was just appointed to your planning commission, he was the one that got up at the board meeting and said, burn it down.
If it was his, he'd burn it down.
Yeah. So not only did he say that, and I've got that's just common public knowledge, it's on videotape. Sorry, a little stuff here, I just printed out a couple of things. He's open hostility towards the residents. And all you have to do is go listen to that July 21st, 2022, I think that, or 2021 board meeting where he spoke. He was not required to say his name that night. We all found out who he was. And then Mr. Cunningham told us that he'd been knocking at his door several times, coming in and saying, put me on the planning commission. So he appointed him. He came up to me, and this part of this is on videotape. He accused me of certain political associations. He based insults that he said to me on my Canadian heritage. That's all on the videotape also. He demanded to know who I voted for in the last federal election. He called us wackadoodles. He accused Scott of frothing at the mouth. He told me to take my attitude down 20%. He said that Cunningham really shouldn't answer my emails. And if he was Cunningham, he would just put all my emails in a box and ignore them all. Yep. Then he went on to say, again, he said, you're Canadian, and I called him on it. And he said, well, you're liberal, obviously. All Canadians are liberal. Now, whether I'm liberal or not, none of his business. And for him as a planning commission member to say that to me, and to accuse me and demand to know who I voted for. And then he informed me, yeah, a bunch of my buddies watch your social media, and we all laugh and communicate back and forth, laugh and say, actually I've got the exact words from the videotape, what he said. He says, sorry, I can't find it. But basically, you can listen to it, and he said, we laugh.
I'm sorry. That was not intentional.
But that's how I feel.
That's right.
But we laugh and go, and we said, did you see that? Oh, how funny it is, how funny it is. Okay, so whatever. A lot of people will think that I'm just complaining for something to complain about, as Cunningham accuses me of and looks at me and says, oh, get this on your little social media site. You just love the drama, don't you? As he laughs at me as I'm making a public comment. But it's all a free look or a free face, whatever it is that he's giving me, which also this guy, Mr. Ross, said too, that he'd gladly give me free faces and free looks. So, here's the thing. So I'm accused of wanting more taxes because of supporting this, the old townhouse. And he said, what do you want taxes for? You're liberal. I said, you know what? I believe that taxes are good, and when people want something, and the people want it, then they pay the taxes for what they want, right? And so our voices matter. Our voices are a concern, and it's not just me speaking, as he accused us of. You and Scott, you're the only two who want anything.
Jack, I understand it's probably a thing. Could you get public comment for us as a planning commission? I understand this is part of it, right? But
Absolutely.
I think you're telling the whole conversation.
Well, do you not want to know what someone on your planning commission has said to me and what
I think
they
you've
stand
told
for?
us a lot. I'm just saying, if you could
I never
summarize. Yeah, no, that's
So
what I mean.
isn't
We have
isn't
it,
that
so-
interesting? And I know it's okay, I'll wrap it up.
Just try to summarize, that's all I
Okay,
meant.
I'll wrap it up. But that's an interesting comment, Steve. And I do understand that it's an appointed position. But again, it was never advertised for. We didn't even know, the public didn't even know, that your term, Rich, had expired, and so did Chet's term. And all we saw on the agenda for the meeting was talking about appointments to the planning commission. We didn't know about it. So there was no call to the public. And again, I know that's not your responsibility or anything, but We find it pretty strange that somebody who's openly hostile and proved his point that night. It was horrendous. But again, I think that you want to know about this and you should know about it because a member of your planning commission is perfectly fine with going up to private residents and demanding to know who they voted for and telling them, accusing them of being, whether I am or not, liberal because of my heritage. Is that right? I don't think so. So I wanted you to know, I want the public to know, and anybody who watched that meeting and knows what this guy said that night knows that he's openly hostile to the residents. Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, thank you for the great meeting. I do appreciate it.
Thanks. Any other public comments at this time?
Can I, real quick, guys?
Yep.
You're 15 minutes late, so take your time. Steve Bissell, Indian View Trail. Just a quick thought is to talk about, and I agree with Jeanette. I think you guys had a good meeting tonight, so appreciate it too. Talking about plans for the future and raising villages and all that stuff for different projects or different opportunities in the township, I think is great. One thing I just want to remind everybody is as we hopefully maybe add common areas to the community or parks or kayaking launch spots, Steve, which I think is awesome. I think one really important thing to remember is we have to realize that those spots have to be maintained as well. And so there's money that you have to find to maintain, or volunteers you have to find to maintain, et cetera. So that's just, the offering up suggestions for improvements are awesome, but we also have to remember that, if you've got a nice park with some nice paths in it, but they're overgrown with weeds and that kind of thing, it kind of wrecks the opportunity for everybody. The reason that's on my mind is my son has moved. We talk about housing too. My 26-year-old has just moved back from Seattle here recently, and he's staying at the house right now. He's got a husky, and we're trying to find someplace for him to run besides the 72 acres back here. The Tyrone Township dog park up on Thompson Road, we just recently figured out it was there. This might have been there a couple of years, I think, but it's right now it's an awesome facility, super well maintained and groomed and really clean for a dog park. And it's really nice to have, like, for instance, have something like that that's being well maintained right now, to go to, take the dog to and stuff. But my point is, it's super well maintained right now. So that was also, just came to my mind, that if we have nice stuff like that, it's always good to make sure we have some sort of a infrastructure of people or whatever to be able to keep it looking good and draw folks. So I just wanted to mention that too.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Public comment this time? All right, thanks. So we'll go to miscellaneous business, and the one item that was kind of brought up, the visioning sessions, is the template for it on the master plan website, Zach.
I don't know if we have that on
Like the
there.
structure for it.
This one,
Yeah,
it's
might
in
be-
tonight's packet.
I know it's in the packets, and I'm just saying for the general public to see it, they could read there.
I don't remember. If it's not, I can put it on there.
Could be
Get
helpful.
it on there, yep.
and people can see. Anything else, guys?
And my only comment is, I thought we had a good meeting tonight, and I'd really like to try to move this towards being positive and constructive. We're here and we're trying to do the best we can, and we only can do what we can do here. We're not part of the township, we're the planning commission. So let's try to be constructive when we're here, in my opinion, and get done what we have to get done. Everything else is out of our control. I don't know who this gentleman is. I heard about this. I've not met him yet. Have no basis of any conclusion of opinion one way or another. So my only opinion is, let's try to get this planning thing done as productively and positively as possible. Man, I'd like to try to be more positive. Let's be positive, please. I come to these meetings, I leave them, and I just feel beat up, and I'm like, I'm looking forward to my term being done, to be honest with you. It's just.
We feel
It's
beat up
just
as
too much.
citizens.
Steve, don't you understand?
I know, I know I should, hold my own opinion, but it's just getting to the point where I'm almost ready to be like,
We want you here. because
and just be done.
It's like
Or not
splitting,
hurt,
it's like splitting everybody up, I mean, just.
It's not worth the aggravation sometimes.
It's like you-
That's it, okay, thanks.
Yeah, so, anything else, Kurt?
Move we adjourn.
Next meeting is next Thursday.
Well, so in other words.
So in other words, don't say anything?
Thursday at 6.
No, I'm not saying don't say anything.
No, you need to know, you
The
need to
workshop
know.
meeting would normally be Wednesday next week.
Right.
It is Thursday, in
Right.
fact. So if you see Wednesday on the schedule anyplace, that's not correct. It is Thursday.
Oh, we'll seriously miss you,
Yes.
Steve.
Yeah, so there is no workshop meeting.
I'll put that up tonight.
Good job.
Good try.
That's good information.
I hope that's gonna be gravel tracks up there.
That's one of the things we're gonna be asking in the transportation.
Just so you guys know,
Still
though,
there.